What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Got some good questions lined up for today. Let's go. First question is from the Diesel. Ego, do you see the Stiverne versus Wilder fight going the distance? The more I watch Wilder, he has a decent check left hook, overhand right, and straight jab to the body. Stiverne tends to cover up in flurries. To answer that question, absolutely not. And I think I even titled my video "Somebody's Getting Knocked Out," and I really see at least a TKO stoppage, possibly a KO stoppage where they just really can't continue. Corner stoppage, some type of stoppage. I just think both guys have too much power. There's kind of some animosity there. Stiverne, he wants to retain his title, do it for Haiti. Deontay Wilder wants to prove that he's no fluke. So I absolutely cannot see this fight going to the distance, but it's a good fight, and I'm definitely going to check it out. Looking forward to it. Next question comes from Eat to Live and M1HJAN. They both have UFC related questions, so I'm going to try to answer them in one shot. I'll give credit to the UFC on two things. They have one belt in each division, and the best has to fight the best. Why is there a misconception in the air that UFC has overtaken boxing? Their pay-per-view numbers are nowhere near boxing's. I think a lot of times in any sport, you get a lot of casual fans who are more emotion based than factual based. They don't necessarily go and do the research. For the longest, I've heard boxing's dead, and then you see fights like Canelo versus Mayweather that does over 2 million in record breaking gates and numbers and stuff like that. So ultimately, I think it just comes from casual fans who base it off of emotion. They think based on whatever style they favor UFC and feel it's more action packed, so that's what they go off. But they don't do the research, and I can tell you right now, back as you mentioned, boxing, the pay-per-view numbers are nowhere near boxing, nor are the salaries. There was a great fight last weekend with John Jones and DC Cormier, and from what I seen, John Jones got in the neighborhood of maybe 500K for that fight, and Daniel Cormier only got 90,000, so less than 100,000. You can make a substantially bigger purse in boxing. You got guys like Reagandow when he fought Donaire, and he was quote unquote a nobody other than having a good Olympic background, and he got somewhere between 750 and 950, and he wasn't the fan favorite. So Donaire, I believe, got over 1 million, and these are like the lower weight classes, and it's just there's no comparison to the paychecks, and I think that's kind of why UFC can get away with some of the great matches. There's less politics because they pay their fighters less. You know what I'm saying? So some people are like, "Why are you bringing up salary?" It has something to do with it because if you have the money to pay $1 million, Amir Khan got 1.4 million to fight on the Mayweather undercard. So did Broner. So that goes to show you what level of cards these are, because you're not going to have that type of money to pay Mayweather, to pay Maidana, to pay Amir Khan, and to pay Adrian Broner. So no disrespect to the UFC, but I definitely think boxing is and always has been bigger, and a lot of people just go off emotion. And then the part B to that question, Ego, do you think the boxing sport as a whole would benefit from a setup like in the UFC? Therefore, allowing more fights, equal ones, and fights that the fans want instead of fights that the promoters put together and most of the time, or at least sometimes, suck or aren't the ones we want or on the same level in sense of skill. I agree. I think if you look at any kind of professional sport and any business in general, there's things you can pick and choose and kind of tailor your business to. Boxing can certainly learn things from UFC that UFC is doing right, and that is the competitive matchups, as you mentioned. I think anyone would benefit from that. Fans want to see, if you're going to pay $60 to $75, why not see the best fights or the fights that you want to see? So if you want to see Danny Garcia and Adrian Broner, why shouldn't we be able to get that? Oh, because they're friends? Like, that's bullshit. It's a competitive sport. I understand friends. And Mickey Ward and Arturo Gatti went to war 3 times, and they were really good friends outside after the first fight. So, yeah, I definitely think there's things to be gained from UFC and looking at how they are set up, and that would be one of them. Minimizing the amount of belts that are available so we don't have so many paper champions and people who really aren't, in my eyes, true champions. And that's definitely something, if I were going to take anything from the UFC, that's what I would take from it. Next question is from Juan. He says, Oscar says Triple G can't fight on the back foot. Do you see the same? And is the style you will think will beat a Triple G referring to a pressure fighter, or do you think someone with more technical, will be able to beat him when the time comes, if it comes? Good question. That's a hard question because I can't say what the man can't do. All I know is he hasn't really had to fight off the back foot. And in boxing, if you have a game plan that is working, why change it? Why alter it? If he's walking forward to these dudes and they can't take his power, then there's no real reason for him to fight off the back foot. So I can't necessarily agree with Oscar with that comment. I don't think he's had to flex that arsenal of his game. But because of that, that doesn't mean he cannot do it. So there's a difference. He hasn't had to fight off the back foot. And again, if that's like Amir Khan was blitzing Devin Alexander. So should he throw less punches or slower punches? It doesn't make sense. What he's doing is absolutely working. So it doesn't make sense to derive from the game plan. That's in boxing. That's how you give other people the advantage. I've seen fights where the guy was clearly winning, clearly ahead, and then they got away from the game plan, started clowning around, and then they got knocked out or something. So, I mean, if what you're doing, like Triple G, he's fighting 3-4 times a year, and he's blitzing through his competition, then there's no reason to fight off the back foot. If I had to guess or speculate, I don't think he would be as effective fighting off the back foot. But again, to experience that or to test that theory, you're going to have to endure some punishment and you have to deal with that power. So I think the style that beats him is not going to be a pressure fighter. I think he'll eat those guys up because unless he goes up in weight and someone has more power than him, because from what I'm hearing, he hits like a light heavy. So his power seems to be the real deal, and guys can't take it. So I think a guy with good power and technical abilities would be the one to beat him. Someone who can take a punch better. Ultimately, I see him. He has to go to 168 for the true challenges. Guys like Andre Ward, Andre Darrell, those types of styles, to me, are going to be better matchups for Triple G. Guys who aren't going to let Triple G just walk him down and dog him. Guys who know how to move. Guys who are more fundamentally and technically sound, as you say. I think that's the style that beats him. You can't be like an Alfredo Angulo type who's just pure heart and going to keep coming forward and getting your brains bashed in. That's not really going to work from what I'm seeing. You have to be like a good counterpuncher and a very sound, like a Lomachenko type in that division. And you have to be able to take a punch. That's what I see as the style that could beat Triple G. Next question is the Super Mario. Who do you think should be next for Victor Ortiz after his last fight? He had a fight with Mano Perez. I know Mano Perez. It was kind of like a comeback fight, a feel-good fight to see where he was. Mano Perez normally doesn't fight at the weight class in which they did fight, so shout out to him for having the guts to even take that type of fight. For Victor Ortiz, I think an Andre Berto fight would be good. Both guys have had some career setbacks, and that'll be a good gauge to see who wants it more and where their head's at and where they are competitively. I think other fights are going to be probably too dangerous for him. At one point, I wanted to see Victor Ortiz versus Amir Khan, but Amir Khan seems to be doing better boxing. Victor Ortiz, he has to regain some of his confidence and stuff like that. So I think he would have to work towards the Amir Khans and the Keith Thurmans and the guys that are kind of at the cream of the crop. Victor Ortiz versus Maidana rematch, possibly. I don't know if Ortiz would even want that. So I don't really know where his head's at. I would say a Berto would be a good fit for right now. Even maybe a Earl Spence. They're trying to give him a step-up test. So that will put him back on the map. If Victor Ortiz was able somehow to beat Earl Spence, which I would favor Earl Spence at the moment, that would put him right back on the map. So I think he's going to have to fight that type of competition after his last fight. He doesn't want to go to the cream of the crops of the Pacquiao's, Mayweather again, or he isn't one of those type of fights. He has to take like a decent level opposition, maybe with something to prove, like a Earl Spence, Andre Berto type. That's what I see.